On today's show, we'll talk about why certain players got cut and how this 53-man roster stacks up for the season that starts in just 11 days. Remember, as always, you can listen to this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell on YouTube so you can always be notified when new content drops. You're inside the Johnny Dell Football Academy. Hello, Niner faithful, and welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game. We do that by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, reminding you, as always, to watch and listen to the usual suspects, right? Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. On YouTube, if you are in live with us now, be sure, as we see the chat blowing up, the hashtag JD49. We want to get the algorithm going. If you are not catching us live, ask yourself why. You may not have hit the notification bell on YouTube. If you are catching us later on the audio side, we always welcome you to chime in live on YouTube. As I said, I am Adam Reno, joined by Mr. Johnny Dell. What's up, man? How is your day going so far as we take a look at this roster?
Oh, it's going fantastic. You know, it was sitting on pins and needles. It was like the countdown to final cut down time, as that was supposed to be 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it rolled around, and we were all waiting as the news is kind of trickling through for who made the team and who didn't. You know, there were some surprises, some guys that ended up on the IR that I wasn't necessarily foreseeing ending up on IR, and then some training camp battles, some of which I covered in my risers and fallers video, if you saw that one. And so it was an interesting day. It's always a hard day in the NFL because us content creators, there's certain guys we're rooting for, right? And certain guys you can see are falling a little bit, but these, in the end, these are human beings. And for some people, this is the greatest day of their life so far. Let me get my hat straightened out there. It's driving me nuts. It's for some people, it's the greatest day of their life because it's the day they make an NFL roster. For some people, it is the worst day that they can have at this point because can seem like the end of all of their dreams. And so it's kind of a crazy time as fans. It signals the official turning of the page to really feel like the season is actually almost here. The season's about to start.
Yep, just less than 2 weeks away. Here's what I was thinking, Johnny. We didn't have a chance as much to talk before the show like we usually do. So I want to run this by you. What do you think about going through some of the players that you were surprised to see cut, as the chat does as well? And we can kind of discuss what you think. You know, you talked about this being like one of the best days. I don't know who is more nervous, my family or Ronnie Bell's family.
Right.
I mean, that he's become our family, like over the preseason, watching him and go with his ups and downs. And again, I live in Big Ten country, as most of you know. So I have seen Ronnie Bell play more, I honestly would say more than the average 49er fan. I just have. And so I was really, really excited to see that he made the roster. But chat, if you have not hit the hashtag JD49, make sure you hit that. Let us know from McCrary Ball to, you know, who were the guys that you guys thought that were like, oh man, he got cut. And I know this happens every year where there's guys who you think personally, oh, why did we cut that guy? But let me start with you, Johnny. The chat, make sure you hit us up. Let us know in the chat who you think is one of the guys that you're like, oh man, we let him go. So I'll start with you, Johnny. Go ahead.
You know, one guy, well, there's probably a two-way tie for the top spot that I'm a little surprised by. And number one was actually T.Y. McGill. at defensive tackle. That's a guy that I'm a little surprised they let walk. Now that interior D line is a little crowded. You have Kevin Givens there. You've got Kalia Davis. Just make sure I'm just looking over the list to make sure I have everything right. You have,
Sure.
Javon Kinlaw, Eric Armstead, obviously is your starters. But after that, it was kind of, the biggest thing I can see in that is that, one, you have a lot of guaranteed money tied up in Javon Kinlaw. To me, if you look at the preseason tape between T.Y. McGill and Javon Kinlaw, you do not see two massively different players. And that's as much a compliment to T.Y. McGill as it is a slight on Javon Kinlaw. Kinlaw is just so stinking physically talented, but so technically unsound that he's very, very frustrating. T.Y. McGill was a complete high motor, high effort guy that won by technique and effort. And so he's kind of one that I'm surprised he go. I think it also speaks to the belief they have in Kalia Davis, a guy that they redshirted last year. And so, that's something that I see now. T.Y. McGill is a guy that maybe is going to be a practice squad guy. We'll see about that. But
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised he didn't make the active roster. Another guy is Troy Fumagalli. I thought Troy Fumagalli had a really good preseason. He was really showing up at tight end. And really, if you look at those first two preseason games between Cameron Latu, Braden Willis, and Troy Fumagalli, it seemed like Fumagalli was head and shoulders above either one of those guys. And that's coming from a guy who was a Latu guy. So that's a little surprising to me to see Fumagalli move on and Braden Willis. Now, that could also be a potential situation where they just see the upside of a Braden Willis because he is very athletic. And that athleticism did pop off the film where they're looking at a guy that has a higher upside versus Troy Fumagalli. But I would be surprised if they don't try and bring him back on the practice squad or if he gets snatched up by another team. I mean, he was a very effective blocker in the preseason.
Yeah. Speaking of the defensive line, I did see that Kerry Hyder and Austin Bryant. When you talk about defensive linemen, I would add Kerry Hyder. He became kind of a fan favorite as well. They do plan on re-signing them on Wednesday, but Kerry Hyder was one of those guys I thought as well. One thing, speaking of defensive linemen, as David Coy says, do they normally keep 10 D linemen?
They usually keep a good reserve. They usually keep enough that they have their starting line, they have their reserve line, and then there's usually a couple rotational guys in there, or guys that tend to not be active on game day, but are part of the 53, but they aren't part of the 46.
Because Bosa would make 9, and so normally if we keep 9 to 10, maybe we're around there. We'll see. And we walk the moon. We're talking about. If we talk about tight ends, I don't know how I feel about Dwelly and Warner, and not just from that missed block that got Brock Purdy hurt, but I don't know. Am I spoiled with Kittle? What is my deal? Why am I not in love with our other tight ends and frustrated that Latu's done for the year? Probably.
Well,
right?
I think Dwelly and Warner are guys that you feel like are always just good enough to get you in trouble. Is that they're just good enough to make the team, but bad enough to where they can cost you in big moments, like the NFC Championship game, or there was a couple big drop passes they had against Atlanta when we played them last year, or there'll be a missed block here or there. I think there is something too, though. We have to remember that tight ends, especially those second, third, fourth tight ends in Kyle's system, tend to be fullback 2 is really what they end up tending to be. And so they have to know all the tight end plays and routes and positions and shifts and all the fullback or what they would call U-back positions and shifts and motions and all that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of playbook learning that has to go into that. And I feel like if you're Kyle Shanahan and you're coming to this point in the season, if there's a tight end that hasn't shown that he's just head and shoulders above those guys, you're going to lean towards the guys who know your system, who know your playbook, who know the culture of the way you do things, and you at least have an expected known from. I feel like that's what happens with them, but I always feel like they're guys that just are good enough to. It was Randy Daytona corrects me. It was Tyler Croft who got Purdy hurt.
Right.
But you feel like Tyler Croft, Dwelly, Warner.
It's the same guy.
It's the same guy. I mean,
like, we're not
really
wrong, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like watching Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, it's this. Yeah, exactly. Like it's they're all the same guy. And so I just feel like they're very underwhelming. I mean, now, yes, we are spoiled with probably the greatest tight end in all of football with
Right.
George Kittle. And there we can't have 3 George Kittles, but that's why I do like the fact that they kept Braden Willis. Now, Cameron Latu, I don't know how this would have shaken down if Cameron Latu was healthy.
Right.
They're stashing him on IR. Now, is this really where he would be gone for the entire season, or is it a situation where they feel like he's about 8 weeks behind where they would want him to be, and so they're just going to stash him on IR for the year, redshirt him. That allows them to keep Braden Willis, and they get to head into 2024 with Kittle, Willis, and Latu as their 3 tight ends. That might be the position. So it just feels like we should always get a little bit more from our number 2 and number 3 tight end.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, cross your fingers that they've improved, another year under their belt. We'll see. Yes, Randy Daytona, reliable but boring. I mean, hey,
that's a great way to put it.
I'll take reliable, I suppose. It just doesn't feel that way always. Maybe do you want to go? Let's see. Any on the offensive side? Let's go maybe in the backfield then to running backs. Anything of note there?
I'll just talk about Kalia Davis real quick before we move on from the D-line. What I saw from Kalia Davis during the Chargers game was why they were excited for him. I mean, he's a big guy. Like, that really shows up on film. Like, he is just bigger than your average man, even for NFL standards. And he doesn't move like he's bigger than everybody else. He moves like you would expect him to be if he was like 290, but he's 315, 320 plus. He doesn't move like he's such a massive human being, but he is. And so you can see why they're excited about him. The guy obviously has not played a lot of football in the last year plus. And I mean, how many guys on this team have we said that before? And so, I do believe that Kalia Davis was the guy that pushed T.Y. McGill out. Very similar body types, but Kalia Davis has more physical upside. That would be the difference between T.Y. McGill and Kalia Davis, was that Kalia Davis just has more physical upside. Just that is kind of the bow on the top of the D-line. And obviously we're waiting for Nick Bosa to sign his contract. I tweeted out today, I shared it because, the Chiefs also haven't signed Chris Jones. Chris Jones is in the same situation as Nick Bosa. He's up for an extension. He's holding out, wanting a bigger deal. I really feel like the biggest roadblock to Nick Bosa getting signed is Chris Jones getting signed. And I feel like the biggest roadblock to Chris Jones getting signed is Nick Bosa getting signed. I believe what they're trying to do is both of those guys want to reset the D-line market. This reminds me of when Trent Williams signed his extension. He got his extension and he was pushing and got $10,000 over like 5 years more than Bakhtiari in Green Bay, because he wanted to be the highest paid left tackle in the league. He was the highest paid tackle, period, in the league, right? Players really do believe in this stuff. This really is important for players to be the highest paid player. That is like a statement from the league and the value of the league to say you are the best player at your position, at this position group, and we're going to recognize that. I mean, he's the reigning defensive player of the year.
Right. It's obvious he is.
He wants to reset the defensive lineman market, much like that was happened with Aaron Donald a few years ago, right? That Aaron Donald completely reset the defensive lineman market, was the highest paid defensive lineman. Bosa wants the same thing. Guess what? Chris Jones does too. They both want this. I guarantee you that both guys are sitting there waiting for the other guy to sign so that they can make sure they get $10,000 more. And I really feel like that's the roadblock here. I'm not sure if it's the 49ers and Bosa themselves. I really feel like both Bosa and Chris Jones want to be the highest paid defensive player.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what we only have about 11 days for them to figure it out, which makes us antsy. Speaking of antsy, I was antsy to tell you guys, since there's more people in the chat than normal, so we have a lot of new people coming in. Make sure that you have hit hashtag JD49. We want 100 people in the chat now instead of 54. That happens when we boost that algorithm. So if you are in, hey Ian, make sure hashtag JD49. The more comments, the more that the algorithm works to show more 49er fans so that we can grow this thing. We had Jesse Sapolo on not long ago. You can go back into our archives and you can see that interview. It was so fun to talk to him. We've reached out to former players. We won't drop names yet. We're waiting to hear back. We're going to get other guests, guys, but we really want to grow this channel. So we appreciate all the love. Thank you so much. You want to talk back on offense now?
Yeah, let's jump to the offense. One area that I was a little surprised at was wide receiver. That not as much that Ronnie Bell made the team. I felt like Ronnie Bell, as the preseason went on, it started to become a situation where you could not have Ronnie Bell on the team.
That's what I thought, but I'm not a coach. I don't know.
I mean, just the things Ronnie Bell was doing, there was no way that they weren't keeping Ronnie Bell. So you knew Ronnie Bell was a lock. Now, what is a little surprising to me is, considering how well Conley played, that he was cut and Danny Gray was kept. And
Right.
here's
And
the
Snead,
narrative. Yeah.
Willie
And
Snead.
Willie Snead was moved on and Danny Gray was kept. So obviously Danny Gray made some strides this year that they were very, very excited about. Kyle talked about how important that deep threat is in this offense. And this will give me just a second to address a narrative that I've seen floated around for 2 seasons now. And that's Danny Gray was drafted because of Trey Lance. No, Danny was not drafted because of Trey Lance. Okay. And this, well, it's the idea that the big arm, you match the big arm with the big deep speed, that was why they drafted him. And I'll tell you, no, absolutely not. Why? Here's why. Because we had Marquise Goodwin, one of the fastest men in the NFL, when we had Brian Hoyer and CJ Beathard as our quarterbacks. We had Marquise Goodwin. Okay. Marquise Goodwin was not moved on because Jimmy Garoppolo was here. Marquise Goodwin was moved on because the dude couldn't stay healthy, that he was injured like 5 times in 3 years and just was never there. So Danny Gray was not just drafted for Trey Lance. He was drafted for the 49ers. And that the fact is that when you can get a guy down the field, it stretches the zones. It makes those deep overs have even more room for yak, and it makes those drift routes have even more room for yak, and it makes those digs have even more room for yak. And that's what Danny Gray brings to the table. And that doesn't matter if you have Brock Purdy or if you have Trey Lance or if you have Jimmy Garoppolo in there. Okay. Very few times in the NFL period do you see balls thrown 60, 70 yards down the field.
Right.
So you don't need a quarterback to throw it 60, 70 yards down the field to help that deep threat take the top off the defense. It's about how much can you take the top off within 3.5 seconds. That's what we always forget. This is not about how much you can separate, period. It's about how much can you separate 3.5 seconds, 4 seconds, which is how long these plays last. That's the point where the ball is thrown. So how much farther if you can push that corner 5 yards deeper to get the deep over, then you have that much more space and that much more room for Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. That's what this is about. Okay. And so, this idea that Danny Gray was there for just that. Also, so I'll leave that there. And yes, it is taking the top off the defense. There was this idea that Danny Gray was only brought in because now you had the arm to take advantage of the deep threat. And I never bought into that. I never believed it. And people would say Danny Gray wasn't playing because Trey Lance wasn't there and he didn't have the arm to get him. And I kept saying, no, Danny Gray wasn't playing because he was a terrible route runner.
and couldn't
he
block.
and he was a terrible blocker. That's why Danny Gray wasn't playing. He could run one route really well, and that was it. And so what this does speak to is that they believe in his blocking, they believe in his route running to where he's on the team, and Conley is not, which is really saying something considering how much Danny Gray missed this training camp. So, that's a surprise to me from the receiver core. What happens with Ray McLeod? He's promised Shanahan he'll be ready week 1, but dude's got a broken wrist. I don't know how that's going to happen. Other than that, I think the receiving core ended up right where you thought it would. That last spot is a little surprising. I really did think either Willie Snead or Conley was going to take that.
I am upset that Snead didn't make it based on that really cool interview that he had regarding Brock Purdy, where he said that, he doesn't want to jump the gun, but being around Drew Brees for 3 years, he noticed some things about Brock Purdy that absolutely were a lot like Drew Brees. And just the way that you saw him talk about Purdy, it was like, okay, well, he may be around, and then that he's not. Now, again, I say this every year, there's a player that you kind of just either hope makes it just because you're like, man, he's been a fan favorite over the preseason, or you just know, hey, this guy can ball. He's been in the league. He's played on another team and did well, But who else? In the chat, there was a few other names. And also want to dispel for about 5 minutes ago in the chat, Bosa to Jacksonville. Did you see that? A trade? Like, yeah, right. Like maybe as Johnny lost the stream, he will be back. That we can't take that seriously, right, guys? Jacksonville is not getting Bosa. And there he's back.
Man, I don't know what happened. You started slowing down, and I was like, something's not right.
Yeah,
something's not right. And then I looked down at, something's going on. Stinking technology. It drives me nuts every time. And I looked down, and I have the stream playing on my phone here just in case. And I looked down and I saw I was frozen and you were not, so I knew it was me.
Gotcha.
So, man, yeah, sorry about that. I left at the receiver core, and you talking about Willie Snead and his
interview.
His interview where he said he sees a little bit of Drew Brees in Brock Purdy.
And so, yeah, we talked about that a little bit. And then I was saying that in the chat about 5 minutes ago, there was a little bit of talk of Bosa, that it's leaked that he's getting traded to Jacksonville. Can we just nip that in the bud? There's no way that's happening.
I don't know why this is becoming a thing. So I saw this on Reddit that there's somebody who said that they have sources that the 49ers are trading Bosa. And it's funny that I'm hearing Jacksonville because earlier, excuse me, oh my goodness, that earlier I was hearing it was another team, not Jacksonville.
Oh.
And so I'm sorry, they are not trading Nick Bosa. There is no way they're trading Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is a generational player. Nick Bosa is the reigning defensive player of the year. Nick Bosa himself is responsible for at least 3 wins last year. So no, we are not trading Nick Bosa. What are you gonna get for Nick Bosa that's gonna make any sense for a trade?
20 first-round picks. Thank you.
I mean, come on. And even if you get 20 first-round picks, I mean, come on. Is anybody telling me that there's a reigning defensive player of the year that is sitting in next year's draft? I don't think so. I don't see it. I don't think it's happening. And I mean, just think back to the Raiders game that we had last year.
Overtime, yeah.
How was that game won? Because Nick Bosa drove the tackle into
what's his face?
Into Jarrett Stidham, and caused him to throw an interception. Okay, that game does not we don't win that game if Nick Bosa isn't on the field. There's no way they're trading Nick Bosa. If that ever happens, I will turn on Kyle Shanahan. Okay, which would take a lot. I'm a big Kyle Shanahan fan. I think he's done a lot of great things. Obviously he's not handled everything perfect, but no, if he traded Nick Bosa, I would send a strongly worded letter to 49.
Strongly worded letter.
very strongly worded letter.
So speaking of that, you kind of brought it up, and I did want to ask you about this. So did you guys happen to see? I retweeted it. The whole Will Compton and Robert Griffin III. Have you guys seen that? Basically, what happened is that Robert Griffin III, as we know, did have Shanahan as a coach, but what he said was that the only reason that Shanahan is not fired yet is because luckily out of the sky fell Brock Purdy and it saved him. And then Will Compton jumped on and they were going back and forth about 3 or 4 videos. And what made it funny is the videos are all from different spots. RJ3 is in a ball pit with his family. Will Compton's walking through his house. Then RG3 says, "Let's handle this the way we used to talk about football in the showers." And then now he's in like the bathroom in his shower. Like, it's crazy. If you haven't seen it, just you can Google it and look this up. It's all over YouTube and Twitter. But Will Compton is sticking up for the organization big time. Not, and okay, you can say he's a little bit of a homer, but the Dallas and San Francisco story over the weekend was just a lot. It simply was. Like, everyone was talking about either how dumb Jerry Jones is for not even telling his coach what he's doing. And then for San Francisco, like, oh my gosh, we found someone to take a 3rd or 4th round pick. Here you go, take them. Like, and the mess that was, and people saying, just bashing us, and then people saying, look, it was injuries, and we just happened to get a player that we really, really, really like. Like, what do you want us to do? And I just want to see, what are your thoughts? I kind of know, and I know you're a big time Shanahan guy. I'm a little bit under you in that. So maybe defend Shanahan on all of this.
Well, number one, I have a hard time taking any honest analysis from RG3 on Kyle Shanahan. I think that's very clear that he is not an unbiased person there, considering what happened with his career under Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan, and how well known it was that they both wanted Kirk Cousins to be playing over him, and that they were both frustrated with him and wanted more out of him, and that they really wanted to play Kirk Cousins, and they believed Kirk Cousins was the better quarterback. And really, time has proved that they were correct. And so I have a really hard time listening to anything with RG3 in this situation, especially with how much this situation sort of mirrors what happened with him and Kirk Cousins. And I just cannot believe that there's an honest, unbiased viewpoint here, that there's not a little of projection going on from RG3 towards Kyle on this. And now, that being said, the handling of the quarterback situation has been murky, to say the least. And Jimmy Garoppolo, we could see, was being very diplomatic about it in the clips that we've seen circling on Twitter today and social media today. Yep. And how, he said there's a lot of weird things going on over there in San Francisco with that. We have to remember, a lot of this is also stirred, and the perceptions of these things is stirred by social media and the way things are talked about. People talk about Trey Lance came on because Jimmy Garoppolo was, he sucked. He was this, he was that. He didn't make these throws. He didn't push the ball down the field. Okay. Jimmy Garoppolo, a lot of why they decided to remember the timing of when they decided to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. It was after the 2020 season. Okay, what happened during the 2020 season? Again, people, I think, get so locked into this because they look at the quarterback situation in a vacuum. It's just looking at Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just looking at that missed throw in the Super Bowl. It's just looking at the stats in the playoffs and things like this. Okay, well, remember, they decided to move on from him after the 2020 season. What happened in the 2020 season? We had no fans in the stadiums. Okay, there was massive revenue losses by the NFL. The salary cap was supposed to go up to about $228 million in 2021. But because of lost revenues from 2020, and the league decided to spread those losses out for 3 years. This was all talked about when they made the decision to move off of Jimmy G, that the teams knew this was coming down the pipeline, that instead of the salary cap going up to $225 million, it went down to about $190 million from $195. The team lost about 25 to $30 million in salary cap space that season, the next season, and the next season. You're talking about $90 million in cap space over 3 years. That's a big adjustment. We saw a lot of teams around the NFL working around this. Kyle's looking at that. And then he's also looking at a quarterback that has missed the majority of 2 out of 3 seasons. And he's saying, okay, I got a quarterback I can't rely on to be on the field. And he's accounting for the entire total that we are losing against the cap each season. So maybe I can get a guy that is going to be a rookie, going to give me the advantage of having a quarterback on a rookie deal while we're in these cap strapped years, and get a guy who might be more reliable to be on the field, more available. That's what went into the decision to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. They have talked about this, that it was about the inability of him to be healthy, and it was the competitive advantage, because Kyle started saying they started sitting there after that season and looked down at the makeup of their team, and they realized they could not keep the team together with Jimmy Garoppolo's contract because of cap strapped years. They lost so much cap, and the easiest way they saw to save money against the cap in that way was a quarterback on a rookie deal. And because they were also looking at the deals that quarterbacks started getting. I mean, you start looking at deals are going 35, 40, 45, $50 million a year. Okay. So those were the reasons that they decided to move on from Jimmy. They won a lot of games when Jimmy was on the field. They had incredible success when Jimmy was on the field. And so, but fans made it about what Jimmy wasn't able to do. And so the idea is that we're going to talk bad about Jimmy. Jimmy can't do these things. Jimmy can't do this. Okay. Trey Lance can do all these things. He's going to be the savior quarterback because he can do all these things that Jimmy can't. And then Trey Lance comes in and he can't do all the things that Jimmy did do. And he's not bringing all these things to the table that Jimmy couldn't do. And now we got a problem. Brock Purdy comes in, and now all of a sudden it looks like Jimmy, but we're also scoring even a few more points. But now we've played down Jimmy so much that Brock Purdy looking better than Jimmy doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And so you have a whole bunch of people, and a lot of content creators are doing this, where they sit there and Brock Purdy, it's just not that impressive, because this is really only what Jimmy Garoppolo did. And we already know he wasn't good enough because the team decided to move on from No. The team decided to move on from Jimmy because they lost $30 million a year on the cap for 3 years, and he couldn't stay on the field. So now you have what they were trying to get in the very first place with Brock Purdy. That made Trey Lance expendable. It really did, because there was just things that Trey Lance was not there yet to be able to do. And he gets traded. He was going to be quarterback number 3. Obviously, he didn't want to. Obviously, there's something in that quarterback room and the way Kyle does these things that is rubbing some guys wrong. I don't know if they have a right to feel this way. Maybe they do. We don't know what's going on in those rooms. We don't know what's going on. They're all playing pretty coy to it, but it's very obvious that Trey Lance wanted out. Okay. And I think there's going to be a lot of drama in Dallas now with the way that Dak responded to the whole thing of, that just saying, well, nothing really surprises me anymore anyways with this team and the way that this ownership operates. And, that you have Jerry Jones has gone out there and made this trade and didn't talk to Dak about it, didn't talk to his head coach about it. It also speaks volumes that all the league really looked at Trey Lance, and the highest anyone was willing to outbid anybody else was a 4th rounder.
Right.
I mean, that says a lot about what that is. So, in the end, is Shanahan on the hot seat for this? No. Why? Because it doesn't matter necessarily what really happened to Trey Lance. It matters what happens at the end of the season. If they're a team that is competing at the end of the season, is one of the last 4 teams remaining, you don't fire one of the last 4 coaches remaining on the season. Yes, we can all get mad if we don't win the Super Bowl, but he's showing that he's a top 4 coach in the league. So you don't move on from a top 4 coach. Those guys are really, really hard to find. It means you're this close. And in the end, do we all want that 6th Lombardi? Absolutely. We don't want to, we don't play to compete. We don't play for NFC championship wins. We play for Super Bowl wins. But to sit here and say that Kyle's on the hot seat, or that Kyle, that Purdy saved his rear end. No, the fact that the team has won a lot of games, saved Kyle Shanahan. The fact that he's still able to win a lot of games, and that he's able to be there. So, and people saying Kyle has lied multiple times to the media when it comes to his quarterbacks. Well, welcome to the NFL. I mean, tell me a coach who hasn't lied about his quarterbacks at some point, and I'll show you guys probably now in Division II college football or something. That's just the nature of the game. There's gamesmanship happening all over the place with these press conferences and all that stuff. I mean, some of it I think they do is just to mess with the media because they don't like the media sometimes.
Right. I love the chat is really crushing it again today. Remember, hashtag JD49 if you are new to the show. We want to boost the algorithm. There is a ton of people in the chat. I will say more than normal. So we can tell we are getting closer to the regular season. And I remember, I think it was Eric in the chat said, when you were talking about this and the salary cap and things like that, of why decisions are made, and he said, interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about that. The reason that I love being a part of this channel is we talk about the whys and hows of the game. I'm sure you guys know that Johnny has amazing videos. If you are new to the channel and you have not seen some of the videos, some of them have over 40,000 views. Take a look at the way that he dissects film and the way that he explains what's happening. This channel is always going to be about the whys and hows of the game. And so even talking through in the podcast here now, we're talking about why decisions were made and how these things work. And so this is what we're about. So make sure you like and share and tell your friends about this channel, because it's one of the only channels that is doing this for Niner fans, and I love being a part of it. Let's get into the way that training camp ended. What did you notice about our last game? I know it's preseason, but I kind of had this after the other game. I kind of had this ho-hum chart. What did you see that maybe would lift my spirits about the ho-hum game?
I think the starting team looked great.
Yeah,
I mean, now obviously they should, because most of the Chargers were not playing. So, I mean, if they hadn't looked really good, then I'd be a little
right. No Bosa on that side either.
Right. There's no Bosa on that side. There was no everybody on that side.
Sure.
The Chargers just don't believe in playing starters in the preseason. So, but the team looks like it should with the starters there. And so for me, I just can't wait to watch actual real football. Now, I am a little bit surprised that Il Manning got cut. He was a guy that I think a lot of us, especially looking from the outside in, were really high on him. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that Leroy Watson was cut. And I don't mean that in a horrible way, that I'm glad that somebody lost their dream. More going back to the Denver game, Leroy Watson got absolutely destroyed on multiple, like Mike McGlinchey Twitter clip destroyed several times against Denver. It was his hand work is leaves a lot to be desired. There was a couple plays where he set for pass pro and was beat with some handwork, just some chops, just a cross chop, boom, and hands were gone, and he was beat, and there was instant pressure. And that was both when Sam Darnold was in and really mostly when Trey Lance was in. But I mean, it was bad. So yeah, he got McGlinchey'd. Gregus Khan says that he got McGlinchey'd. He did. And so, I was not surprised to see Leroy Watson did not make the top 53. So, that's a spot that I was a little surprised at. Now, I think the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is seeing if Elijah Mitchell can stay healthy. As we need a second running back. I think Ty Davis Price, between the issues of being a pass blocker and then the ball security issues that Jordan Mason was showing, like these guys both show a lot of upside, but there's just some dings on them that you're going, I really need a reliable number two there. And Elijah Mitchell, when he has played, has been as good of a running back as we have.
Right.
But the guy has been like the Jimmy G of running backs, cannot stay on the field for nothing. And last year, I mean, he was banged up a number of times his rookie year. And then he's last season had the knee injury, was out for 8 weeks, comes back in within the first game. He's back in, he's gone for another 8 weeks, is out. He comes in for like a game and a half and he's out again. And then now training camp opens and it gets about a week into training camp and he's out. And then he comes back in training camp and he was out again. And they're saying now he's returned to practice, that he's looking good. But if Elijah Mitchell can stay healthy, the 1-2 punch of CMC and Elijah Mitchell would be absolutely fantastic. But he has got to stay healthy. And so, you know, I love the way Jordan Mason runs the ball. I really do. I mean, he reminds you of like a baby Marshawn Lynch. You know, he's a baby
Or
Lynch.
Marion Barber.
Yeah, or Marion Barber. You know, he's just kind of got like he does not look the weight that he
Right.
is. I mean, dude's like 225, and he looks like he's about 205. So dude's got some thump behind him, but got to hold on to the ball. Got to be able to be a receiver out of the backfield. Ty Davis Price, dude looks like he came to play this year. But man, you can't whiff on pass pro like he's whiffed. He's had multiple ones this preseason. So I don't know about that. You know, that offensive line, it does worry me a little bit. I'm not a big Nick Zakelj fan. Jalen Moore, he played better than I thought, but he's also a guy who struggled staying on the field when he's had his opportunities. You know, what happens with John Feliciano, Matt Pryor, I don't know. I don't feel great about the depth of our offensive line. I feel like the depth of our offensive line and defensive line are not what they were the last couple of years. So, you know, those spots give me concern. Now, areas that I'm really excited about, linebacker.
Man, some beasts.
Yeah. And you know, so I was not surprised that Marcelino McCurry-Ball was cut. I do believe they're going to try and bring him back on the practice squad. I think he's going to be a practice squad guy, but I'm not surprised on that, just because, and I was talking about it from the very first preseason game again after Denver, and it just kind of theme continued through the Chargers of Jalen Graham and D Winters. Jalen Graham really was popping, and Jalen Graham has that knack as a linebacker, that thing that you cannot live without for linebackers, which is he fills the hole without hesitation. That when he sees the hole, he hits the hole. That there's an aggressiveness there. If you got guys that don't do that, that's really hard to fix and bring along. And so, you know, I love that about Jalen Graham, is that he was, I mean, brought the thump in the run game, has the sideline to sideline speed, and he doesn't hesitate when he sees something. Linebackers are kind of like quarterbacks in that they can't hesitate. When they see something, you got to go for it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But you know, you can learn from it and move on. But you can't hesitate. And that was the only thing I've seen with Marcelino McCurry-Ball, was he would hesitate just a little bit. And then you try and make up for it in speed. And against second and third stringers, he was usually, you know, right in position where he can make up on speed. But you start putting that against first stringers, you're coming in relief. I'm not so sure about that. That's where your speed isn't going to be able to necessarily make up for it. So, you know, the linebacker was to me one of the hottest competitions of camp.
Yeah, linebacker should be, as far as depth goes, not where we struggle. We did cut some offensive linemen, and that's been just since McGlinchey left. And I know some people just were happy to see him go, but guys, he was still overall a good player in my opinion. And losing him, it's not like we have someone that we're like, if a couple injuries happen, we are not, in my opinion, looking good. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I'm not excited if and when injuries happen.
It's not good.
You know, we'll see how it goes, but you know, one thing that was surprising in that you saw with the safety spot is that the team really valued experience there. You know, Oren Burks, who we didn't see really hardly anything of in preseason, he made the team.
Sure.
And you know, so when you look at, and he was a guy that was signed as kind of a roster filler free agent last year, not even this last offseason, but offseason 2022. And so obviously they were waiting a little bit towards experience there. So, I mean, you really have the All-Pro, Talanoa Hufanga, and you have Tayshaun Gibson, you have Oren Burke, and then you have Jair Brown, the high pick in this year's draft. So, that's interesting. The biggest thing is, though, with this team, for the secondary to look good, the pass rush has got to be there. And so Bosa's got to get signed. Javon Hargrave was looking like every bit of what they spent money on. Eric Armstead can be relied upon to be very productive. And then the question mark of who's going to play opposite of Nick Bosa. There's you got Cleveland Farrell has come in there. Drake Jackson. He did have that amazing near interception.
Man, what effort
that they had against the Chargers. I mean, the guy has a knack to bat the ball. I mean, he really does.
And to find it with a helmet on, guys, go home, buy a helmet, put one on, and then look up and see how fast you can find something. It's not easy.
Yeah, and I mean, he had 4 batted passes last year in limited playing time, and then gets another one in. I think he had 2 this preseason, and so already showing that he's still got that knack. And now, can he add some pass rush pressure with that? Can he also stand up against a run? Has he done that? Those are questions. Cleveland Farrell, is he looking to? He's on that contract year. He's only got a 1-year contract. Are they looking for him to be that Omenahu, that Arden Key, who just plays lights out in 1 year with them, has the physical upside and does a lot of things? That's the question mark. What's going to be there? Robert Beal, he made the team. That was surprising. We didn't see much of him in the preseason.
Right.
It's a little surprising to me that Kerry Hyder's the guy that they're okay with trying to pass through waivers and bring back on the team. Of course, I think they have the ability to match, so they could release him as a procedural move and without risk of actually losing them. While they have the other guys, because some of it is they're going to be putting some guys on probably short-term IR, but they need to be on the active roster before they put them on short-term IR. What was surprising to me was they put Zane Gonzalez on IR. I was not expecting that. I was expecting like an injury settlement or something. That's a little surprising to me. I don't know why they made that move. So we'll see how that goes. And I need to think a little bit more about my life to figure that one out.
Sure. There was another question in the chat that I also wanted to find out. Michael Hurst says, "Are you guys worried about run up the middle? We're getting gashed even with starters." The one question I had regarding that is, how much stock do we put in when we have maybe a Fred Warner in, as well as Kinlaw, a couple other guys in, and then we see in the preseason 7-yard run, the long run, obviously, I mean, that's definitely not 49er football, but in general, we can admit that we did get gashed a little bit, but how much does that really concern you regarding the preseason?
It doesn't concern me a whole lot. When I put on the film from the Chargers, one thing that jumped out immediately was that Fred Warner is in all pro Fred form. Fred Warner, I mean, it was like, it looked like week 4, week 5, where, I mean, there was going to be a run. Fred was just driving in there first thing. I mean, filling the hole. It's not something I'm worried about too much. Again, got to get Bosa out there. The biggest concern I have looking at it again is the frustration of Javon Kinlaw, that the guy, what'll happen is, and this is what's so frustrating, is that when he plays his assignment sound and plays with technique, he will just take a lineman and drive him straight into the backfield, blow up a play. And it's almost like he gets so excited that he drives the guy back that he forgets he should probably disengage and make a tackle sometimes. But he can do that. And then another play, it's like he'll try and shoot a gap, go around a guard, and get ejected completely out of the hole because he's going the wrong direction. He's going the way that they're trying to block him, and he gets high and he turns his shoulders. And so he gets out of a position of power, and he's just moved 2 and 3 yards down the line, and this gaping hole opens up. That is what I saw a couple times that led to some big runs against the Chargers. And he's just such a frustrating player to watch because he's got so much physical potential, but he is so technically unsound, which is very frustrating for a guy that is going into the season in the spot in the league that he is in his 4th season. You would expect him to be farther along. Now I get it. He's also hasn't played a lot of football,
right,
But some of these things are I don't know when the light bulb is going to go off. That's what it feels like, is when you used to watch defensive linemen. What it really reminds me of is some of the older 49er fans will remember Isaac Sapawaga. That guy was so physically gifted. He could just control the line of scrimmage at will when he wanted to. But he was so often going into the wrong spot or not reading things right. And once the light bulb went off for him, he was a dominant player. But he had to get the light bulb to match the physicality. And that's what I see with Javon Kinlaw. I'm waiting for the light bulb to go on.
It's interesting that you say that. And we remember when we talked to Jesse Sapolu, like, it was so cool, like, to see him break down how he knew that the defenders were going to come at him, and even really good players, and how he was able to dominate with Guy McIntyre and the rest of the guys for so long. Like, to hear him explain that speaks to that very thing. And it's cool to see some of that breakdown. Obviously, we really hope that Kinlaw can get that light bulb, because he's a physical, just dominance, of a specimen, Another question here. I don't know if I'm going to try and pronounce that. Africansicle.
African XL.
African XL. Oh, okay. I guess that's not as bad then. When you're reading it fast, you're not thinking. It's like, but yeah, obviously that is probably African XL. So yeah, the question is, yeah, African. Yeah. Hey, sorry, man. What he expects defense to adjust to Brock this season. And I will say this. I've been in some basically like Facebook groups of different sports and different things, and people are saying the film is up on Brock Purdy, and I'm like, well, that's interesting, because we beat the Seahawks 3 times, and when you see that the way that, and even I know this, you're the guru, but even I know this, that Brock Purdy looks off very well for last year being a rookie. Even I know that, and I'm just a dumb fan on the couch. I'm not Johnny Dell Football Academy, but even I know that. And it's like, film is one thing, but when a guy does things that you cannot account for, when he stares down this way, all of a sudden comes back and then fires it, it doesn't matter what film is, right? I mean, what's your take on that?
I mean, when you have a guy who's playing from the pocket at a really high level, that's not it. There's not as simple as, okay, now we're going to have the book on how you beat him. Different quarterbacks throughout the league, and like if we go back to Michael Vick, for example, Michael Vick, there was certain things that the Falcons would run with Vick that teams started to gather up on. Okay, it was a lot of half field reads. And then if he was pressured up the middle, if he was pressured on the right side, he was always going to flush out left. And so what teams would do was that they would put a spy on him, and they would always be prepared. Once at this beat, it's going to be he's going to be heading out to his left. And so those are like things that when people say, okay, now you have the film on this guy, you can figure out what they want. You can figure out, okay, when a guy sees single high, what's he going to be looking for? What routes is he going to be looking at? When he sees pressure, where is he going to be looking to go with the ball? Does he always try and hit the slant off the left side? Those are the sort of things. Okay, what they're going to look for is, does he throw? If we flush him to his left, is he more apt to throw a wild duck that can be put up for an interception? If he's getting pressure up the middle, is that when he's more apt to throw a really dumb pass? Is it pressure off the edges? And that will tell them where they want to bring pressure from when you're coming to blitz, and then how guys look to beat the blitz and how we can do that. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when teams say, what's the book on this guy? What is the film going to say? And the issue I've had with this story all off season of, once teams get the film on Purdy, that they're going to figure him out, and he's going to be toast. I don't see that happening, because Purdy wasn't so successful because of any like shtick he was doing, of any special thing that he wasn't bringing some extra physical trait that you take that away and suddenly they're not as good of a player. Like when you go to play, for example, when you go to play Fields in Chicago, you have got to keep contain on him. You let him out of that pocket and he's going to hurt you. So the book on Fields is you keep him in that pocket, you make him go through his reads, you make him panic, you get him to pull his eyes down, and now you have your opportunity. Once the linebackers see Fields drop his eyes and he's looking at the rush, they stop playing coverage and they get him, and you keep him within the tackles. That's what your goal is when you play Fields. When you go to play Brock Purdy, you're not saying, okay, that's what we got to do. What you're saying when we play Brock Purdy is we have to stop Kyle Shanahan's offense, because this is not just you're going in to face Brock Purdy. You're going in to face Christian McCaffrey in the run game. You're going in to face off against Elijah Mitchell coming as the number 2. You're going in to face Deebo Samuel in the backfield with Christian McCaffrey lined up on the other side, where he can run a lookie route as well as anybody in this league. And so you have to figure out, are you going to cover Christian McCaffrey in a passing situation with a linebacker, or are you going to put a DB on him? And now you possibly have to cover Deebo Samuel out of the backfield on a choice route with a linebacker. Or are you going to put a linebacker out there because you don't want to cover Deebo Samuel on a choice route with a linebacker? You want to cover him with a safety. You want to cover him with a nickel guy. Well, now your nickel guy has to be able to stand up against the run in between the tackles with Deebo Samuel, who runs as well as any running back in this league. And you got George Kittle in there, who's going to be coming in. He's going to be coming to block your nickel back.
X factor.
Not the band.
Yeah.
But that's what you're presenting to defenses. So if I'm a defensive coordinator, probably the last thing I'm thinking is I've got to figure out how to stop Brock Purdy. You're thinking, how do I stop the guy over there? I'm playing chess. I'm playing 3D chess against Kyle Shanahan. And so that is what is tough. That is why I don't buy into that the book will be figured out on Brock Purdy. What has been the narrative since 2019 about Jimmy Garoppolo with the 49ers? You take away the run game and you stop the throws over the middle, right? How many of us have heard that?
Right.
We've heard that probably hundreds of times. The 49ers still win 70% of their games with Jimmy Garoppolo, as almost as high as any other team in the league as far as winning percentage. So obviously it was not that simple, even if you had a so quote unquote book on a guy. So you can have the book on Brock Purdy, and it's going to be the same thing. People say you stop the run and you stop the passes over the middle. It is not that simple by any stretch of the imagination. So stopping Brock Purdy, I don't think is going to be this thing that suddenly people can do that and they figured out the 49ers. No, you have got to stop the 49ers offense, which is a very, very tough thing to do. When you got a Kittle and you got a CMC and you got Deebo Samuel and you got Brandon Ayuk, who's out there cooking guys one-on-one. I mean, just look at what he did against the Chargers, which is exactly what I've been talking about for years, that I wanted to see Brandon Ayuk do. I wanted to see him become that guy that when it was one-on-one coverage and you have that, and it's about you have that guy on an island and your number one receiver can win and he becomes that reliable target, because that would change the offense. Because here's the thing. When you look at what is the hardest thing for Brock Purdy to do, and I said this about Jimmy Garoppolo coming off the 2017 season when he got his big contract, people said, man, he did all this really well. What would you do if you had to play defense against him? You were the defense coordinator. I said, I would try and play press man sticky coverage. And when you go back and you look at the 2022 NFC Championship game, that's largely what the Rams did. Okay. And the reason why I said it, because it doesn't become about a guy, how quickly a guy can work through his reads against zones. It's going to be about, can your receivers beat their defensive backs? That's what it comes down to. Do you have a reliable guy who can do that? And Brandon Ayuk did that at moments in that game. Jimmy Garoppolo, though his body was not in a place to throw very well at all in that game, and a lot of other things happened. But Jimmy missed some throws in that game, and there's no two ways about it.
Right.
So and even then I was sitting there looking with Brock Purdy, and we started to see it at the end of last year that he started to become that guy. And so seeing that play in preseason made me so excited. Like, that is what we've been missing, because think about, like, Joe Montana had Jerry Rice, Steve Young had Jerry Rice, and then he had Terrell Owens. Okay. It wasn't like he was out there with a bunch of scrubs. He had some of the best guys to beat man coverage out there. When you have a guy who cannot be covered one-on-one in man coverage, that changes everything for your offense. And so book out on Brock Purdy, I'm not buying it. Once it's really about, can you stop the 49ers offense? Because Brock Purdy, when he's doing that, he was operating the offense at a high level. He wasn't doing the Brock Purdy thing. He was operating the 49ers offense. So to stop him, you have to stop the 49ers offense, which is an extremely difficult task.
Huge. We're so excited for the season to start. I wanted to give a quick breakdown of our story again and how the season is going to play out as far as this channel, because again, as excited as I am to report, there is just a record amount of people in the chat today, and I did see even last week's, we got over 1,000 views. So the channel's definitely growing. I see the numbers on the subscribed has been going up. I'm so excited. But I wanted to tell you guys a little story and let you know a little bit of what the channel is going to be doing this year, as it's our first full season of Johnny and I together. So in December of last year, I reached out to Johnny on Twitter as a true fan of his content. And when I say fan, my parents and I would go to their house and tell them to pull up YouTube. Well, I'd have to show them how to do it, how to mirror YouTube and put it on their smart screen. And we would watch Johnny Dale Football's Academy, and we would go through, and we were just fascinated by explaining the plays and explaining why this guy did that, because we remember watching the game and thinking, why is that guy so wide open? Why didn't that defensive end crash down on this? Like, we know enough about football, but not the ins and outs like Johnny does. So we would watch this channel, and I was just fascinated, but I noticed that there was no podcast. Now, I own a podcast production company, and I hit him up on Twitter and was like, man, love the content, real fan here, both of you and the Niners. I was wondering if you're interested about a podcast. And Johnny said, man, that's interesting that you say that. Like, I don't have one. I've been wanting to. I kind of messed around. I just don't know what I'm doing. And so I was like, well, can we talk? So we got on a Zoom and we talked. And I'm like, well, what if we did something for the playoffs? This is December, guys. So we're like, the playoffs are coming up. What if we start the podcast for the playoffs, and we'll go into the matchups and everything and just start the podcast? So that's what we've been doing since either late December, early January. So it has not been a full 12 months, and it has not been a single regular season game yet. And so what we would like to do, I think, is when we play on Sundays, we're going to have our show on Mondays for the reaction of what happened, some of the ins and outs. Again, we're going to talk about the whys and hows of the game. In the meantime, Johnny will work on his video that gets 40s of thousands of views, right? With the breakdown, the X's and Y's and why this happens, right? And then he'll release that video. Make sure you like and share that, And then on Thursday, I know for the New York game, I have a good friend. She is locked in and ready to talk. She has a New York Giants podcast. You guys will love her. She's so cool. We're going to talk to as many people as we can on Thursday regarding who our opponent is, and then get into a little bit, because then the breakdown video will be out by then. So we can discuss that a little bit, where we can say, hey, at the 17-minute mark of that video, we talked about how Ayuk ran this route and what Purdy saw on that play. And now we can talk about it more in depth along with the chat. So the idea is that on a regular Sunday game, that we will come to you live the way that we are now on Monday and Thursday. Remember that Johnny will release his videos of showing the whys and hows, and why the X's zig and the O's zag, all that explained in depth. And then we'll come to you again on Mondays and Thursdays. So remember to like and subscribe, share with your Niner friends, let them know what's going on. I mean, we feel like we know you guys, Cornelius Merritt's back in the chat. Haven't seen you in a while, man. Like, we love having you guys in the chat. So tell your friends, tell your family that are Niner fans to jump in here. Let them know what the situation is. If you are listening on wherever you get your podcasts, understand that the better option may be on YouTube if you can, because then you can hit the notification bell, get notified when we're going live, and join the chat with all these people like African XL, as I say it right that time. So that is kind of what's going on. Johnny, did I explain that well enough for you?
You really nailed it. And one thing I'm really looking forward to, especially the Thursday podcast, is that I've been asked by people over the last couple of years, we do some scouting videos on our opponents, and I'm going to be looking this season at all of our opponents each week and getting an idea of that. The problem with trying to do the scouting videos, and there's a reason I only do it during the playoffs, is because it takes an incredible amount of time with all the editing and all the play selection and all that. Now, to put that in perspective, normally a review breakdown video is going to take me anywhere from 12 to 14 hours. Now, I work a regular job outside of this, and the scouting videos take me anywhere from 16 to 22 hours because they're a lot harder to do, to try and compile. This is what I see and this is what I think the 49ers are going to do. So you have to watch their film, and then I have to go back and try and find specific plays from the 49ers catalog of what I'm trying to show that we can do. And so that's why the scouting videos become very, very difficult, why I generally save them for the playoffs. Last year, I was so exhausted by the time the playoffs were coming around. And Adam knows this. He saw me in the backstage areas with some of these shows that we were doing in January last year, where I was like just droopy eyed. Because in the end, it was a lot of work. And so usually I save those for the playoffs. But what this podcast allows me to do is that while we are, and my wife's in the chat and she says a lot of time. And so we are very thankful for all the support that people bring with our Patreon members, our awesome Patreon members, and all the people that have supported the channel along the way. I'm waiting on the designs to come back for some new merch. We're going to have some awesome merch. You guys will want to see these things. We're going to have a few plays, shirts out there that are some famous 49ers plays over the years with just, if you know, you know. We're going to have the catch on there. We're going to have John Taylor in the back of the end zone in Super Bowl 23, things that really dial in with our stuff and what we like to do. But this podcast is going to allow me to then look through the film and be able to give a scouting preview from the film perspective. I won't be showing quite everything like I normally do on a breakdown video where it's all edited out, because that takes so much time, but allows an avenue where I can talk about that and help people know what that is. And so that's why I'm really excited about these Thursdays. It allows a format to be able to get through what I'm seeing on film and what I expect to see from the games in a palatable way and in a way that is sustainable for me to do. Like I said, trying to do the videos twice a week in January was exhausting. I could do it for about 4 weeks before I hit a wall and was like, I'm done. Doing the entire season isn't going to be there. But I'm also looking forward to, I'm going to be watching film from different colleges around the league this year. Looking forward to the draft next year, be getting more prepared for that, and into the Senior Bowl. I'm getting updates from the Senior Bowl already. I was credentialed last season. If you didn't know, I was able to go down and cover the Senior Bowl, which was super fun. I only live 5 hours away from Mobile, so it was just a quick drive down there, and I was able to cover that. So we're definitely going to cover the Senior Bowl a lot this next year and into the off season. So that's why I'm so excited about this podcast and what we can do and where we can grow.
Yeah, for sure. We want to have more great guests again, and so we really want to grow this thing. So thank you so much. I just wanted to keep you guys informed because we do have so many faithful fans, not just the Niner faithful, but faithful to the channel. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up and get you excited, because I hope you get the sense that we are just so excited to be able to come to you guys and just talk 49ers football and just get into a little bit deeper than a lot of other channels. And that's truly what we want to do. So thank you so much for joining us. Take care of each other. And as always, go Niners.